Chapter 31. In Sicily, if you have any money at all, you do not put your loved ones into the ground. That is too final a defeat, and the earth of Sicily has already been responsible for too many indignities. So the cemeteries are filled with little stone and marble mausoleums, square tiny buildings called congregazioni. Iron-grilled doors bar their entrances. Inside are tiers in which coffins are put, and then that particular tier is sealed with cement. The other tiers are reserved for family use. Hector Adonis chose a fine Sunday shortly after Piscioda's death to visit the Montelepre cemetery. Don Croce was to meet him there to pray at the grave of Torre Giuliano. And since they had business to discuss, what better place for the meeting of the minds without vanity, for forgiveness of past injuries, for discretion? And what better place to congratulate a colleague for a job well done? It had been Don Croce's duty to eliminate Piscioda, who was too eloquent and had too good a memory. He had chosen Hector Adonis to mastermind the job. The note left on the body was one of the Don's most subtle gestures. It satisfied Adonis, and a political murder was disguised as an act of romantic justice. In front of the cemetery gates, Hector Adonis watched as the chauffeur and bodyguards lifted Don Croce out of his car. The Don's girth had increased enormously in the last year, his body seeming to grow with the immense power he had accrued. The two men passed through the gate together. Adonis looked up at the curved archway. On the wrought iron frame the metal was twisted to spell out a message for complacent mourners. It read, "We have been like you, and you shall be like us." Adonis smiled at the sardonic challenge. Giuliano would never be guilty of such cruelty, but it was exactly what Spinoff Piscioda would shout from his grave. Hector Adonis no longer felt the bitter hatred of Piscioda that he had carried with him after Giuliano's death. He had taken his revenge. Now he thought of the two of them playing as children, becoming outlaws together. Don Croce and Hector Adonis were deep in the sepulchral village of small stones and marble buildings. Don Croce and his bodyguards moved in a group, supporting each other on the rocky path. The driver carried a huge bouquet of flowers which he put on the gate of the congregazione that held Giuliano's body. Don Croce fussily rearranged the flowers, then peered at the small photograph of Giuliano pasted on the door. His bodyguards clung to the trunk of his body to keep him from falling. Don Croce straightened up. "He was a brave lad," the Don said. "We all loved Torre Giuliano, but how could we live with him? He wanted to change the world, turn it upside down. He loved his fellow man, and who killed more of them? He believed in God and kidnapped a cardinal." Hector Adonis studied the photograph. It had been taken when Giuliano was only 17, the height of beauty by the Mediterranean Sea. There was a sweetness in his face that made you love him, and you could never dream that he would order 1,000 murders, send 1,000 souls to hell. "Ah, Sicily, Sicily," he thought, "you destroy your best and bring them to dust. Children more beautiful than angels spring from your earth and turn into demons. The evil flourish in the soil like the bamboo and the prickly pear. And yet why was Don Croce here to lay flowers at Giuliano's grave?" "Ah," said the Don, "if only I had a son like Torre Giuliano! What an empire I could leave for him to rule! Who knows what glories he would win?" Hector Adonis smiled. No doubt Don Croce was a great man, but he had no perception of history. Don Croce had 1,000 sons who would carry on his rule, inherit his cunning, pillage Sicily, corrupt Rome. And he, Hector Adonis, eminent professor of history and literature at Palermo University, was one of them. Hector Adonis and Don Croce turned to leave. A long line of carts was waiting in front of the cemetery. Every inch of them was painted in bright colors with the legends of Torre Giuliano and Spinoff Piscioda, the robbing of the Duchess, the great slaughter of the mafia chiefs, the murder of Turi by Aspano. And it seemed to Hector Adonis that he knew all things, that Don Croce would be forgotten despite his greatness, and that it was Turi Giuliano who would live on, that Giuliano's legend would grow, that some would believe he never died but still roamed the Camerata mountains and on some great day would reappear to lift Sicily out of its chains and misery. In thousands of stone and dirt-filled villages, children yet unborn would pray for Giuliano's soul and resurrection. And Aspano Pisciotta, with his subtle mind, who was to say he had not listened when Hector Adonis had recited the legends of Charlemagne and Roland and Oliver, and so decided to go another way? By remaining faithful, Pisciotta would have been forgotten. Giuliano would fill the legend alone. But by committing his great crime, he would stand alongside his beloved Turi forever. Pisciotta would be buried in the same cemetery. The two of them would gaze forever at their cherished mountains, those same mountains that held the skeleton of Hannibal's elephant, that once echoed with the great blasts of Roland's horn when he died fighting the Saracens. Turi Giuliano and Aspano Pisciotta had died young, but they would live, if not forever, certainly longer than Don Croce or himself, Professor Hector Adonis. The two men, one so huge, one so tiny, left the cemetery together. Terraced gardens girdled the sides of the surrounding mountains with green ribbons. Great white rocks gleamed. A tiny red hawk of Sicily rode down toward them on a shaft of sunlight.